Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. Today's show is sponsored by Ringmaster, on a mission to launch B2B podcasts that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth. Ringmasterlive.com. Bam. All right, we've started. We have hit the go button, and this thing is launching. I'm excited. I can't wait to introduce my guest today. He's a badass. He's absolutely someone to learn from, someone to follow on LinkedIn, all the things, moving things, breaking things, changing things. Well, who is he, Casey? Who is he? A seasoned marketing leader, thought leader, a go-to-market thinker and strategist, years of experience with demand gen, and decades of success driving growth and revenue and helping companies grow. I mean, it's all about that. B2B SaaS, martech, even edtech. GTM Advisor, Scale Venture Partners, VP of Marketing at Sales Impact Academy. Sol Weinreich, welcome to the show, sir.
Great to be here, Casey. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, you are a busy guy.
Yeah, a lot going on. Startups are like that, right? They're just chaos. The question is, could you contain that chaos for a little bit? Kind of like, lava lamp, right? Or one of those electric things. There's always just things going and popping off.
Going crazy. So I'm glad we were able to capture the lightning for the next hour or so. So in order to launch this thing, I got to pass you. It's heavy, but it looks like you got this. Okay. Okay, here we go. You want to grab that? Okay, yeah. Take Thor's hammer, smash for me some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception, set the record straight once and for all.
So the myth I'm going to smash today, and the record I want to set straight is the idea that, and I think this is more prevalent in B2B marketing, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but that is that marketing is more art than science. And I just don't think that's true anymore. I think the more we're able to measure, obviously, the more we learn as to, it's really just inputs, outputs. It's really what marketing comes down to. It's really a math problem in that sense. Obviously, there's, you write 10 blog posts and one of them does really well, and that there's an art component to that. But ultimately, the only way you know if anything's working, the only way you know what you need to do, the only way you know what those inputs need to be is by looking at math like science instead of like art.
Yeah. So sometimes, because art you can't put your finger on, right? It's harder. Why exactly is that Picasso so famous? It's good and it's, yeah. But with science, with math, with numbers, you can say, yeah, that was a shitty blog post, right? Or that campaign worked,
Exactly.
and it made us money. Where does this come from? Why do people tend to think or tend to weight heavier on the art or think that that's where we should be?
I think it's a complicated question, obviously. And I think the first place I like to look when I think about this, on more on that meta level, I like to look at performance marketing, right? At B2C, really think about Google, right? Think about marketing in that world, Google, Facebook, et cetera. So you've got, a product you're trying to sell, a D2C product. You want to sell, we'll call it a shoe brand, doesn't really matter.
Right.
As you grow, you have to get more and more sophisticated because that direct attribution, like click dollar, goes away. So in B2B, we never really had that direct attribution, or if we did, we always knew a lot of that was, obfuscated or hidden, or we didn't understand a lot of that. And one of the things I learned through, some of my experience in that world, in that agency performance world, is I learned about something called incrementality. And that's really when this got solidified for me as to marketing as a math problem. And the question is, do you know how to do the math? Do you have enough data, to train a model, to have a computer do that math for you? And incrementality is a very simple concept. And that is, instead of attribution, instead of trying to say, when someone visits my webpage, it's worth a certain amount, or someone downloads a blog post, it's worth a certain dollar amount or a certain, amount. Essentially what you say is how much does this thing help me incrementally? So if this thing doesn't happen, if my buyer's journey has 5 steps, for example, what does that look like? What does my, ASP, et cetera, look like versus if it has 10 steps? And so when you start to think about it in that nature, you really should be able to do this for everything. And I think some of the challenges, it's really hard. It's just really, really difficult to do that. And so because it's so hard, and because we generally do not have enough data, especially, in startup land and early stage, right? We tend to just kind of shrug and say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to be, really focused on things that are a little bit harder to measure, but ultimately, we'll see, rising tides lift all boats or something like that. And it really comes down to just the difficulty around measurement and understanding it, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
It can be hard to measure, and sometimes it's almost like that natural artistic urge not to, or like we're procrastinating. Yeah, it's the hard work, and it'd be so much more fun just to A/B test this YouTube thumbnail, or something else like that. But we got to do the work and put the time in.
Yeah, no, I mean, and A/B testing is another good example, right? Like of the math and a little bit of behind marketing. A/B testing is the kind of thing, like the way A/B testing works at its core is you either need time or you need volume, right? And so you either need to be sending a bunch or doing a bunch of, getting a bunch of impressions, whatever, doesn't matter what your thing is. Like I automatically went to emails and subject lines because
Sure.
that's a classic A/B testing, right?
Classic.
Exactly, but, like, you either need a volume or you need time, and so, with A/B testing, when it comes to that, right, like, we don't necessarily do that, and not we don't necessarily have to do that all the time. I like to think of it as, again, incremental improvement, and so what can I learn from my last, campaign, my last email, my last subject line, my last thumbnail to then, continue to apply and to try a new one, try a new one, try a new one. Now, obviously, if you're running a bunch of ads and you're spending a bunch of money, you're getting a bunch of impressions, you certainly should run, the same creative with a dark background, a light background, with a person or with a computer. You should test all that stuff, and it'll very quickly float up to the top, right? Because these algorithms are pretty good, right? They're pretty good at kind of taking it all in and then, pushing, because ultimately they just want to put what consumers react to, because they want to generate more money, right? That's another, kind of myth. We're not going to smash that one today, but there's another myth, and that is that, Google or LinkedIn or these ad platforms are just trying to get your money. They don't want to give you anything. They just want your money. And that's why for the longest time everyone was doing manual bids, on
Mhm.
Google, right? Because they got into this idea that Google is trying to, screw you in a sense, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, Google's what, 70 billion. Last I checked, I haven't checked in a
Sure.
while. In ads and a quarter or some obscene amount like that. I mean, at some point it becomes monopoly money. As we just say, a bit billion, right? But they do all this money in ad spend. They're obviously providing value, right? They're obviously doing something really valuable here. And, machine learning, that computer is going to be better than you at figuring out, how much to spend. Because again, you have to remember it's an auction. So it's like have you ever been to a car auction?
Yeah, I haven't. I once went to an art auction on a cruise ship one time.
You're a little out of my league then, but no,
No, it was grandma art too. It was not like yeah.
fair enough. But, this is a story of, 20 years ago,
Yeah,
25 years ago at this point. I know I look really young, but I'm not that young. So my dad took me to a used car auction.
cool.
And the reality of the used car auction is, like, everybody bids their best price to buy that vehicle. And the inventory in the auction is the same way. And so you want to bid your best price for that click. And that click, not all clicks are created equal. So if, for example, the click you're trying to buy is someone who's, like, really far along the buyer's journey, and they did a, transactional search for marketing software, and, you work in martech, for
Sure.
example, right? Like, you obviously want to pay a lot more for that click than you would for, some college student who's screwing around the internet, right?
Yeah.
And so, that it, you have trusting Google to do that, to, like, hike the bid when appropriate, right? To get you that click that's more valuable. It's just smart business.
Yeah, and to your point, if it was a scam, then, uh, people would stop using it, So and they know that too. So they like, yeah, maybe you wanna get some more money out of your advertisers, but or, folks clicking, but they have to get value too, otherwise the cycle won't continue. So it's in their best same with search, right? It's in their best interest to give you the best result, otherwise you're gonna stop going there as a user.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Google wants to show you that top result. They
Yeah.
want to hit it, on the top of the page. That's why they've introduced, the answer box. They've introduced all that. They want to get you that answer as quickly as possible. Now there is some funny business maybe, but like this is stuff that has to get, potentially legislated. And that is the idea that, Google controls the entire market. So Google
Yeah.
could kind of set this like base bar and say, well, I'm only selling this click starting at $100. But the reality is someone else is willing to pay that $100. So again, it's not like, it's not a scam. It's not like Google is doing something illegal or bad, right?
Sure.
They're just saying this click is always worth a minimum of N. And that's just a reality. And ultimately, like, again, trying to say, I only want to buy clicks for $1, like you're only going to get, maybe once in a while you'll beat the algorithm because like it'll actually be a smart person or whatever, not smart, but someone who's in your market, who's ready to buy
Ready to
whatever.
buy, yeah.
But in reality, like, you're going to get it wrong a lot more often than you get it right. And so a lot of your money is going to go to kind of this vanity metric of like, oh, we pay this much per click, or we got, this value. But in reality, you're just getting bad traffic.
Yeah, in trying to treat your advertising as an art quickly ends up losing you all the money, and it was your fault, not Google's, because I love the point you raised about trying to play those games of, well, the algorithm's trying to screw me, so I'm gonna put this really weird bid, but then the algorithm just moves on past you, and
Yes.
everyone else gets the traffic and you don't. But I think it's sometimes it's just people don't know those numbers. Like, what is that click worth to you? If you haven't done the work, I love how you said earlier, marketing is a math problem. I mean, if you haven't done the work, then you don't know. And you're trying to play a math game and you're not playing math. Like, you're going to lose.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think like from that perspective, it's really understanding kind of what your conversion rates are on the other side. So ultimately, you could then figure out, hey, if I spend $100 on a click, but it's a really good click, or $200 on a click, but it's a really valuable click, that converts, right? Ultimately, like when you think about it, right, there's two things you have to understand. You have to understand how many people click on your ad, and then what happens when they land on your site. Like how many people convert to purchase or whatever it is you're trying to drive. We'll stick to the B2B world, form fill, right? You're trying to drive a form fill most likely. Okay, how many people who fill out forms
Yeah.
who came from this source? So make sure you've got UTMs, you got all your tracking in place, obviously. But if you have all that in place, you can then just back into it. And you can say, well, for every 10 people, I get one opportunity. And, for every 10 opportunities, I get one win. Let's just keep
Yeah.
the math simple. Ultimately, so if I spend $100 on a click, it costs me $1,000 to get 10 clicks. That $1,000 gets me, one opportunity. That's, a tenth of a win, so I need to spend $10,000 to get to enough, clicks to get to that win. But then ultimately that win isn't worth more than that $10,000 in this scenario. Like if my average selling price, again, with this source is 20 grand, I'm doing great, maybe, or maybe it's 30 or 40, again, depending on your business, your CAC LTV. But the more you understand about your business, the easier it is for you to say, this is what this is worth. This is what that's worth. I mean, it's the same thing when you think about going to a conference. Everyone loves conference, right?
Yep.
Conferences are back. COVID's over.
Bring it
Everyone's back.
on.
Everyone's back in the field, right? So, like the same idea there. You go to a conference and you spend 50 grand, let's say. Okay, are you going to generate enough opportunities? Are you going to generate enough, brand awareness? Are you going to generate enough revenue to justify that? If you are, you should continue going to that conference. I mean, again, maybe in SaaS, that justification is a little easier because, your LTV is long enough. So you can basically say, hey, as long as we can break even, or as long as we can get, a small incremental value. But ultimately, the reality is like you spend 50 grand, you got to be able to justify it. Same idea, with paid ads, same idea across the board, really. And you can figure it out if, again, you understand the different inputs and ultimately how those result and what outputs those result in.
It's so true. Like what you're describing, there is an answer, right? Should I go to this conference? There is actually a yes and no answer, that you can get to, if you do the work. And I think so many times we're stuck in the, well, it felt good, but it felt that it's like, okay, cool, that's what it felt like, but did it contribute? Did it help you incrementally? And I'd love you to bring it back to the incrementality, because I think that's a really cool word. It's a long word, but we don't think about it enough. Talk to me about what it is to increment something versus, say, go all, moonshot. Like what is an increment?
So an increment means like incrementality, like in this context, really what we're getting at is like, is how much does this one thing change like the ultimate outcome, right? And so if we could understand our buyer's journey, right, and we have maybe 5 or 10 or 50, it doesn't matter, n different versions, and we understand all of those different versions, and then understand the outcome of all of those different versions, right? We can then understand what changes when we do one thing versus a different thing. And then
Yeah.
ultimately that lets us build this big picture to better understand kind of how each thing contributes to that ultimate outcome. And again, that doesn't mean that everything contributes positively. Some things contribute negatively, right? Some things will bring your ASP down or whatever. Again, that's why we're talking about what source, where you get that traffic from, right?
Yeah.
At that conference, right? Where's your booth located? How many of the people who are going to the conference? One way I like to think about conferences is how many people are going to the conference are in my market, in my ICP.
Yeah.
Like, what are the companies? That's why the first thing I ask whenever I get a conference, it's like, who's going there? What are the company names and what are the titles? And if I can get, my metric used to be about 45%, but if 45% of the crowd like is in the center of my target, I'm good. I know I'll hit my number there, right? But it's the same idea. It's like this, each additional booth visit you want to look at incrementality on the conference itself. You can look at it that way too and say, okay, every incremental action at this conference, how do those combine to then help me understand the ultimate outcome of what happened here?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that metric of, 45% of these people fit, then I'm in, because you don't want to be trying to find the 3 people that fit your your product. That's not, you shouldn't be having to hunt and peck like a woodpecker to try to find the revenue at these events.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you want to take that more bespoke approach, right, that more account-based approach, right,
Yeah.
you can do that, but that's account-based marketing, right? And ultimately, I think this, kind of blends the two together because, traditionally account-based marketing, you go through and you say, hey, these 5, these 10, these 50, whatever, these N accounts, these are the ones I want to go after. If I get into these, I know I can service them. I know they'll have a long LTV, et cetera. And so if you understand what that ICP, right, that ideal customer profile is, and then you apply that on that conference scale, now your conferences are almost also, that account-based approach because you're giving yourself an opportunity to get in front of these accounts that you want to break into. And so that's where that 40%, 45%, as long as, about half the crowd, maybe 4 out of 10, again, 40% of the crowd is that right crowd for you. Now you're marketing, you're getting in front of the right accounts, which ultimately is what you need to do. I mean, like another, way to think about it is like relevance trumps all. Like if
Like,
you're relevant, you're going to beat nothing else is going to, and that's true whether it's your SDR email or whether it's, being at the conference. And how do you know you're at a relevant conference? Well, your customers are there. Simple.
boom. I mean, that's where it's at. Um, how do you, it, someone listening to this is like, okay, I'm in, I want to, you have this new mindset where I'm thinking about how much does this one thing, influence the outcome and affect the outcome. This incrementality. I want to do this. Where do they start? And what are the things they should be thinking about to really deploy this?
I mean, I think you have to really keep it simple because ultimately we generally don't have that data, right? And so from that perspective, it's
Yeah.
more for me is, and I'm going to go back to the basics here. And that's just saying like, okay, understanding the traffic source or the ops source, meaning like, did we get them at a conference? Did we get them on the internet? Did we get them via outbound? And then it's just looking at that data and understanding how things fluctuate based on on source, based on target. Again, if you're doing outbound and you target a specific type of company, are you then hitting that ASP you thought you wanted to hit? Right. And it's just back checking that and then figuring out what's going wrong because things do go wrong all the time. And that's why, like for me, B2B marketing in particular is a very iterative approach. It's test, iterate, try again, test, iterate, try again. As long as you have that iterative approach and you're never letting lack of knowledge stop you and not try, but you're trying stuff and you're constantly learning and you're constantly iterating. Ultimately, that gets you into this world where you can at least understand different sources at a very basic level just to start. You can understand, you can look at buyer journeys one by one. Again, if you're in a early stage SaaS startup, you're probably not doing, hundreds of deals a year, right? And even if you are, it could be 10, 20 a month, it's still hundreds of deals a year. 10, 20 a month, like, okay, take a day a month and go through your close one, go through your close lost,
Yeah.
and try to understand what happened here versus there. Did this person, download a white paper? When people download white papers, are they more likely to close?
Mm.
And the problem then, what happens is sometimes is we make a bad decision. We say, well, If people download white papers, they're more likely to close. So I'm going to make sure everyone downloads a white paper. Well, that's not really, you're kind of burying, the treasure there. It's trying to
Right.
understand why this person who also downloaded a white paper, what about them is true as a whole? What's that whole picture? What's their whole journey? And how is that journey more ideal? And how do I create more of those journeys?
What's your favorite way of discovering answers to those questions about their journey?
You got to get into the data, man. Get knee deep, get neck deep, right? Mad scientists get a bunch of different spreadsheets going. Pull, I like to always start by pulling in all the opportunity data from Salesforce. I'll pull in years, even 7-8 years, as far back as we can go. I'll try to build kind of a picture by looking at all different metrics, like how many opportunities do we create, how many opportunities do we close, how many opportunities do we win, how many opportunities do we lose, how many opportunities, what's our average selling price, what's our average pipeline amount, what's the pipeline we can create, how much of that pipeline do we win, and like looking at all of that, and I'll always look at it in two ways. I'll look at it by created date and also by close date. So if I'm looking at it by created date, I'm looking at and I'm saying, like, I don't really care when this closed. I just want to understand what I created in January and what happens to what I created in January. And I want to, understand again how that pipeline behaves, how that opportunity behave, all of that. Get a picture there. And then I want to look at the reverse of that picture and say, based on close date, right? How do things look? Do things look different, right? And then I want to try to kind of marry those two together to get that very clear picture of what's happening in my, kind of in my marketing and sales and marketing pipeline, to better understand again how things are going and what's happening.
Okay. Gotcha. What's interesting as you're describing that, I kept hearing you saying like opportunity, the close one day. This is, traditionally seen as the realm of the sales team, right? The realm of sales marketing. We're all focused on our leads, but the fact that you are diving in, going mad scientist on the opportunity data is awesome. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like ultimately, the opportunity is the thing where you can really follow that journey most easily, right? Prior to the opportunity creation, it's hard. It just really is. Now, doesn't mean it's impossible. There's some really great software out there. I haven't necessarily used all of it recently. So like if there's something better than, Visible or Bright Funnel was hot for a while until they got acquired. I don't know where they're up to now. But some of that attribution software, which again is going to try to give you a value for each, but don't get caught up in that. Like I always found the value in that software in tagging every activity and just knowing everything that happens, because we didn't have the infrastructure to tag every activity and knowing everything that happens. And so just being able to do that, and then, at the opportunity level, you can really start to understand that journey and you can really start to build that picture. And the reality is ultimately opportunities are just an outcome of different inputs, of further up the funnel inputs. And so again, as long as you could understand what inputs create those outputs, you could then drive through. But then again, those outputs, understanding the value and how good those outputs are and, what's happening with those outputs is really important. Otherwise, we tend to end up in this world of, vanity metrics. We get excited about views, or we get excited about, open rates on emails or things like that, which again are important, because if you don't get enough people to open your email, not enough people see your email, not enough people can click on your email. So like there's a certain, constraint you create by not having those metrics, tight, and not understanding those metrics and not driving up those metrics. But ultimately, you really have to, the best open rate. We've got people on the team, I'm managing our SDR team now. We've got people with a 50% plus open rate, but that doesn't mean they're getting the replies, right? So, the open rate's great. It's great that so many people are seeing that copy, but,
Yeah.
we always have to continue to look at that copy. Same idea, like not looking at the opportunities is like focusing on the open rate and not looking at the, the reply rate and trying to understand how to improve that reply rate if your open rate's good, or, along those lines.
Okay. With incrementality, I'm hearing the straightforward, simple idea of it's math for marketers. It's inputs, it's outputs. And for some reason, it feels like it's in conflict with the idea of contribution. I think you even mentioned this earlier at the very beginning. Is contribution, is that a vanity metric?
I don't think so. I mean, I think like at the end of the day, there's so many different ways to skin the cat,
Yeah.
right? Attribution, incrementality, all of them are valuable. All of them are important. It's just, don't be dogmatic about it, right? Don't say, hey, I got to understand for every single thing we're doing how, it plays out, and how it itself, like this one touch, contributes to the overall. Because then when you get dogmatic, you end up in trouble, because you're not flexible enough to find the story, to find, kind of that, how the math works. Because as much as, marketing is math, the reality is we don't necessarily always have the best tools. And even if we do, we don't necessarily always understand. There's so much that's, the dark web. I remember when 6 Sense coined that, right? They said, 80% of the buyer journey happens before they even get to your website. It's the dark web. It's, this hidden
Yeah,
part, but it's true, right? Buyers are on the internet, they're on G2, they're on Gartner, or whatever, the
sure.
Gartner, Capterra, right? That's what they call. They're on Trust Radius, they're on these sites, they're looking for, solutions, they're doing Google searches, they're reading blog posts, they're on LinkedIn. And that's how they're kind of, building this picture of what they need, and, how they're going to deploy their capital, et cetera, whatever they're going to do. And so, when you get dogmatic, you end up in kind of like in a silo, or in, tunnel vision. And that's where you get hurt. And so it's just keeping an open mind, right? And saying, like, how do I understand, what's happening? And then how do I act on that? And, if I find a nugget somewhere else, then dig deeper, try to understand why did this one opportunity, why was this one opportunity really good? Was it because the CEO knew a guy? Was it because, this seller just, does one deal a year, but they do their whole number in an entire year? They hit their quota on one deal. Like, there's all sorts of crazy stuff that goes on. But if you can understand that, you can say, oh, this is an outlier. This is actually not indicative, or this is not representative of our reality. And then you can go back to understanding what's representative of what is normal, and how I can, again, engineer more of what I want, more of that the regular normal stuff, as opposed to, trying to engineer, a lightning strike.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Have you had a win recently in a particular campaign or channel? Are you seeing any macro changes to channels at large, at least in your space?
When is a good question? I mean, but we'll talk a little bit more about some macro changes. I'm seeing that, especially with outbound, right? Especially with the SDR function, relevance is it. Nothing else really matters. I mean, I feel like it used to be maybe even 6 months, even a year, obviously 2, 3, 4 years ago. If I put enough effort and what I was doing was relevant-ish, like, I can still get a meeting on the books, and I can get the opportunity to pitch that, to pitch why you should talk to us and why we're relevant. Today, I don't think you're getting the meeting if you're not relevant. And so relevance is the name of the game, particularly when it comes to outbound. And that's really hard, because, like, I don't know what's going on in your world. I don't know what Casey's, business, and Casey's,
Yep.
world. And so I'm trying to pitch you on a SaaS platform, to do, again, whatever. Like, how do I know it's relevant? And finding those nuggets, right? Using intent data, continuing to get smarter and smarter about what is relevant, and how to make my message relevant. So if I've got intent data, and I could, for example, build, an intent topic, right? And understand who has intent for a specific topic. And now I can build a cadence or a sequence that speaks to how I position myself against that topic. Now I'm a lot more likely to be relevant, because I know somebody at this organization is interested in this. And, we can always say, oh, well, what if it's the enablement person and not the salesperson? That's who we sell to.
Right.
Okay, but that's kind of silly, because, like, the enablement person's probably doing it because the salesperson told them to. Or if they're not, I mean, if you hit the salesperson and the enablement person, and both of them are looking, the enablement person suddenly goes to the sales guy and says, hey, did you see that? That's really awesome. And you're like, oh yeah, I did. I got a really cool, YouTube video from them that explained their product and whatever. And so, yeah, I think it's all about relevance today. And it's really hard, but that's the trend I'm seeing, especially when it comes to that outbound function. Otherwise, like, you're basically, like, at this point, personalization is just not enough. It's just not, like, writing a really good email and saying, hey, I was in Vermont. I love beer, and from Vermont. There's really good breweries up in Vermont. Do you want to talk to me about SaaS? It's like, hey, I appreciate that I'm from Vermont. I appreciate that you like beer and you know about Vermont breweries, but, like, this is just not relevant. It's not well positioned. And so it's really important to nail that relevance.
What is relevant to you right now?
What is relevant to me? Is that on the macro or the micro?
No, no, in the micro, if and this is a marketing show, so you're safe here. But if SDR or sales or account rep was listening to this and was going to reach out, what are the challenges that you'd love to have solved?
The challenges I'd love to have solved. I want to figure out how to. I'm going to give you a kind of a ridiculous answer. Both
Yeah.
speed up and slow down time at the same time.
Okay.
Like I either need to slow it down to where I can continue moving really fast, but then get to my outcome quickly, or I need to speed up time and understand, quicker. I mean, it's just the hardest thing, about today's market. I think is knowing what reality is, just because, especially if you're trying to, it's a newer product or you're newer to a role. I'm pretty new to my role. And so for me, the challenge right now is just understanding, right? Like what the mean is. Like, everything reverts to the mean. Like, so just what's our baseline? What should
Yeah.
we be expecting from our team? I've got 5 brand new SDRs on my team. They all started within the last 6 weeks, right? And so I just don't know what they're capable of. They're all super bright and they're all super eager. I just, when it comes to opportunity creation, I don't know what they can do. And
Yeah.
so I need that answer. And if I knew that answer today, I could then make decisions, because ultimately, there's always levers to pull. If you can't create enough opportunities, you can go up market and try to create opportunities with a higher dollar value to hit that pipeline goal anyway, right? If you are creating a bunch of opportunities and they're really low value and they're just churning through and nothing really good is happening, like, again, knowing that, and you can figure out how to correct those things, but that diagnosing those things takes time. And so it's really, again, like I said, I wish I had a little, either look into the future, come back, look into the past, and try to just figure out the answers to a lot of those questions as quickly as possible.
That's awesome. Um, and so you want to speed up time and slow down time, but you want to do it legally, right? You want to.
I mean, I'm not against. I just don't want to get caught if it's illegal.
Okay, because right, right. Just don't get caught. Well, I was looking at those Celsius drinks, right? They seem kind of calm and nice and sugar free, but 200 milligrams of caffeine, more than a Red Bull. But Red Bull feels like it's the guy in that's ready to just explode. But no, it's actually Celsius.
Yeah, I mean, Celsius is crack in a can.
Yeah.
Like, it's like crack. You drink it and you're wired. I mean, I don't know for how long, depends on your caffeine intake, but you knock off 200 milligrams in caffeine in, half hour or whatever. You polish off one of those. They taste delicious. So, you just start drinking. Next thing you know, you're just like, well, it's, at least for me, I'm wired.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I call it crack in a can.
Great time to write your marketing copy, after drinking one of those. But you know what they're doing these days, Sol? The kids, like you got to respect the caffeine. So I might sip it, have a little coffee, sip throughout the day. They're just getting those giant cans. I feel like an old guy talking about kids these days, slamming these giant cans.
It's funny you should mention that, because 5-Hour Energy,
Yeah.
well, what they figured out was not the product. Or their product, I should say, is the format. So they figured out that, like, people didn't want at that time. Maybe now today is different, right? With the kids these days, us old men will talk about that. But like, where you have a 16 or 20 ounce can of energy drinks.
Yeah.
Well, when 5-Hour Energy got into it, there was nothing really that was just like a shot that really, jammed everything into that small format. And that's what they figured out. That's really what got them on the map. They actually, I believe, um, I believe the 5-Hour Energy product is not even developed by them. It was like the guy was at a conference. He saw it in like large cans. He was like, "That's stupid. Who's going to drink, 700 milligrams of caffeine or whatever it would be, a 5x 5-Hour Energy?" I don't know. But he was like, "That doesn't make sense. Actually, what we got to do is we got to, make a small format and give people, a shot that's going to, get them going." And that was really the pattern. And similarly, you mentioned Red Bull. Red Bull, actually, they're a marketing company.
Yeah.
They're not a drinks
They're
company.
like a media company, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
They've got a racing team. They have guys jumping out of planes from the atmosphere. And like those, that's what they try to do. They try to create this buzz. Red Bull gives you wings, this energy, right, around this story that Red Bull somehow is this product that changes things for you and gives you this again, wings. And the way they do that is by being part of extreme sport, right? Whether it's Formula One racing or whether it's jumping out of airplanes or whether it's the X Games, and they want to tie. That's what they do. They just tie themselves to extreme sport. But Red Bull itself doesn't manufacture the product. They just, market it.
They don't even manufacture it.
Yeah, I believe it's manufactured by a company in Austria. I mean, I'm sure at this point there's partnerships and stuff in place, but
Partnerships.
like
Yeah, yeah.
it's not like an exclusive product. Maybe there's some exclusive formulation or some slight exclusivity, but like the thing itself is just an energy drink that anyone can make. The hard part is the brand, and Red Bull is like purely a brand play. But I'm willing to bet that they have pretty good data scientists and pretty smart math people there too, because even brand is a science, not an art.
It really makes me wonder about what percentage of their revenue is actually beverage versus everything else.
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT when we're done.
I tried pulling up real quick, but no, lots of other numbers. But yeah. So your point, they're a media company. All sorts of cool things going on. So okay, so we'll make sure we get you hooked up with the Celsius afterward. um, maybe every time we do a new podcast, it's like we'll just send the guest a Celsius and
Yeah,
just
you should send instructions. Drink this a half hour before, and
yeah,
then nobody will have to speed up the podcast because everyone will be talking so fast. So you won't have to listen on 1.5x or 2x if you're into that.
that's
You'll
so
just be able
funny.
to listen regular because like everyone will be wired.
That's so funny. I actually had someone tell me recently, like, oh, I have to listen to you at 1.5. I'm like, all right, man, you do you. If I sound like, Alvin the Chipmunk at 2.5 speed, that's all good as long as it helped you, as long as you get the information.
Yeah, I'm a big speed up. 1.75 is usually my speed. And so sometimes I'll play podcasts in the morning at 1.75.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife, she just hates it. She tells me I can't hear it. It gives me a headache, and I'm like, you have to listen faster. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay, I pulled up my speed. For me, it's Audible. Like podcasts, I'll typically keep them where they're at, but for Audible, I have to crank that up, especially if I'm learning something. So I'm at 1.55 over there. So
All right, not too
interesting.
shabby.
Interesting. So, dude, this is what I got. This is my real big question now. Like, who are you? Who are you? Take me back in time, little Sol days. What was it like growing up to you? Did you know you're going to be a marketing leader, teaching people how to do things, like spreading the good word? Like, take me back in time.
Oh boy, I mean, who am I? Well, definitely did not know I was going to be a marketing leader. I actually had a very non-traditional college background. I studied Talmudic law in a religious Jewish college. I am Orthodox Jewish, so I studied Talmudic law in college. I spent quite a while just trying to understand the intricacies of Talmudic law, and it's really interesting.
Set you up. Sorry, does that set you up to become a rabbi, or is it just like it's almost like just that's what your undergrad is, and you could do anything with it?
It's more study. Like for me, it was more study for the sake of study. I never thought I'd be a
Cool.
rabbi, but I
Okay.
just wanted to study because culturally and because it's a massive, massive compendium. 20 some odd volumes, right? And
Wow.
just there's so much there. And what I always found interesting about Talmud is it's almost like a complex system, right? Where you have to you study a passage, and a passage of Talmud will be an oral argument between a bunch of different people, right? It'll be like, well, this rabbi said that, and this rabbi said that, and hey, there was a third rabbi who said something else that contradicts the other two. So who's right? But you
Mm,
have to be able to keep that all straight in your head as you're reading through this text, right? And then on top of that, you have all the different, all the different commentaries trying to explain that text, right? And so you'll read that text, and you got to keep that all straight. And then you got to get into the commentaries, and different commentaries will read the same text differently. And so you have to keep all of their, kind of opinion straight until you can formulate your own opinion. And I do think that that did set me up for, dimension. As funny as that is, because like we've been talking, right, about incrementality, about looking at, the data, about unraveling the knots and unraveling the picture. But that's what I did, when in college, which not typical. And then I went into the printing industry because my dad was in that industry. And I was like, well, that's what you do, right? You grow up and you become a printer.
that's it.
Um, yeah. So I started printing books, and it was very fulfilling. I really love printing books because you come out with something and you're like, hey, I made this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is, like, and you can hold it and see it and touch it, and there's a certain joy and beauty to that, to being able to make something real and physical, and to know that thousands of it exist and people use it and buy it.
Yeah.
Um, but I realized that the printing industry was not the future. Books were, declining, print
Yeah.
especially declining, digital, coming to life, and you have the Kindle, you have all this. And so this is probably around 2014. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to do a startup. I read TechCrunch and seems like everybody can do it. So I'm going to do a startup. And so I tried. I gave it a valiant effort. I don't know even one line of code. It was before no code days and way harder. ChatGPT didn't exist. I'll tell you about a later iteration of a startup I just screwed around with recently. Way different than what I was doing back then in 2014. Um, and my idea at the time was before this was before Twitter had an algorithm, and it was like, how can I surface relevant tweets to things that you care about immediately, as opposed to you having to either see it in your timeline or then catch up with it another way. And I was actually inspired. I think it was the football draft, which is like next week, right?
Okay.
And it was like or it was football free agency. It was March. Yeah, it was football free agency, and it was like someone had signed with my Giants, and I was like, I wish I would have seen that, the minute it happened, because I'm a huge Giants fan. I got to see what's going on. I got to
Right.
know who we're getting, whatever. And ultimately, so started working on that. Never really got too far. Built some product. What did I know about startups? What did I know about tech? What do I know about marketing? I didn't know anything at that point. I was coming from account management, printing business, my own entrepreneurial thing. But just really spent a lot of time networking and really getting to know people in tech, in the New York City tech scene. This was also, kind of the New York City starting to rise. Like, we're starting to get all these different events. Workbench is starting to do this enterprise meetup, and you've got, local New York VCs who are throwing conferences. So I just networked my way into tech. And eventually someone turned to me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to run marketing for us? You seem to be doing marketing for this conference, seems to be going pretty well." And I said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." And the rest is history.
Man, do you think you'll stay in this? Like, have you found your place, your zone? Is marketing, is tech, SaaS marketing? Is this what you've been looking for?
SaaS marketing is awesome, and I love it, and I'm not looking to get out of it anytime soon.
Right.
I mean, what I would say is, I do have an entrepreneurial streak, right?
Yeah.
And the more you learn, the more companies you work at, kind of like I'm still looking for that one product, that one idea that I'm really passionate about, that I want to just put all my chips in on.
Yeah.
Um, because I still want to, I know so much more than I knew, 2012, 2013, 2014, back in the day when I was just getting into this, to where now, like, I know a lot of people, I know a lot of talented people. And it's almost like, if I can just find that one thing that I believe enough in, that I'm willing to do, even if no one's willing to fund, right? Because that's what it takes, to get off the
Yep.
ground. But that would be the only thing that got me out of the B2B marketing scene, would be that one idea where I can generate some traction. And the beautiful thing is, today with ChatGPT, with AI, you can build a functional product by yourself. You literally do not need a developer, because you can just ask ChatGPT. You can say, "Hey, I want to," I did it. I was like, me and my friend wanted to build a service that would send you a daily affirmation. And you'd wake up every morning, and we were just trying to create more joy, more peace, more love in the
Yeah, I like
world.
that.
Well, it doesn't sound like me, but this was the mission.
Yeah,
Um,
it
and
does.
and I was able to use ChatGPT, to use Heroku, and use Twilio, and wire together a couple of things, and we pulled ChatGPT in the background to generate these affirmations. We built a system that would allow us to approve each one. So we would get a text the evening before and would say, "Do you approve it? Yes or no?" And we
Wow.
built, signups, and we built it all. And we didn't, continue to drive it through. Just, kind of jobs came, life came, and got in the way.
Yep.
But what I did see was, if you have an idea and you know enough, technically enough architecture, because, like, if you ask ChatGPT, "How should I build this?" Maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't. But if you have some idea of, like, just the different basic building blocks of, products, of applications, of technology, you can use ChatGPT to build that, and to get it spun up and get it going, and it'll work, or at
Wow.
least it did for me.
Wow. So with all of the crazy things going on now, yeah, actually, quick shout out. So Sales Impact Academy, what's going on? What's cooking?
Sales Impact Academy. So what we do is we help sales teams improve their skills with live coaching. and we do it at scale. So, if you think of this, we're having a one-on-one conversation, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of coaching is like that, and executives have that coaching, right? They've got that one-on-one coaching very often. But how do you, help your team improve their skills? How do you upskill your team? Generally, it's usually going to be on demand. The reality of on-demand learning is you have to be really motivated, or you got to
Mm,
have, a policeman watching you. You got to really be either forced into it, either of your own volition or by someone else. The thing with live learning, we all remember school, like, we always complain, but nobody hates it that much. Everyone shows up. Why not? It's fun. You get to learn,
right.
you meet people. And so if you can bring that live element to, at scale to people, that's where you can win. And so that's what we do. We bring live coaching for sales skills. So you want to get better at cold calling? Come join our classes. And the beautiful thing about our classes is it's not or it's not we've got this really good, framework, and that's learn, practice, apply, right? And then review. So learn, they'll show you they'll show you the framework in action. And so, you have for discovery, it's called the dig framework, right? And that's to basically dig and ask more questions, right? In the short version. And so the instructor, the coach, will teach that framework. And then they'll do a practice run with another coach who's on that, kind of call. Because again, this is all, even though it's one-on-one and it's sales coaching, it's all, virtual. And so you'll have that kind of practice session. And then you go into this breakout room. And in the breakout room, you actually have to try it with a coach.
Wow.
And so you get, 5 or 10 minutes per person, because you have 3 people or so with the coach. But we've got a bunch of little tricks. So when you're on the stage and you're talking to the coach, you're blocked, right? Only
Right.
you, like everyone else, kind of fades into the background. So you don't even realize that it's there. And so everyone kind of gets to watch you practice the framework and then apply the framework. And then what we find is, because number one is live, reps love it. They keep coming back. 87% of our reps, who try a session, try a second one. And then, because they actually practice the skill in real life, in a safe space, they're more willing to now go out and pick up the phone and make those cold calls because they've practiced it. And then the final, piece of the puzzle is we'll also send them an on-demand, feedback as well. So they'll get that on-demand recording and they'll get additional feedback that way to further kind of understand kind of what the coach is telling them and how to be successful. And we find that this way, these skills aren't, not like traditional sales training where it goes in one ear, out the other. 70% of it's gone within a week, because who
Oh,
remembers what the guy said to me? He was saying they're talking for 6 hours. I wasn't sure if it was sexual harassment training or coaching. I didn't know what I was doing by the time I was done, And so this way, you get to learn, you get to practice, you get to apply, and in 45 minutes, you can get better at a distinct skill.
dude. Yeah. You know what? Like, the idea of just getting better, I think a lot of people say, like, happiness is when you get to the place, but I feel like happiness is making progress and seeing yourself get better at something. And so I guess in a way your anecdote app was making people happy, but this can too. Like, making yourself better, it feels good, and then secondarily or primarily you close more deals at the same time. So that's like pretty sick.
Yeah, and I think what you're touching on is we're never really done, right?
Yeah.
Life is a journey.
Yeah.
Like that is life. Like the entire everything about life is a journey, right? And we're just going through, and we're on this amazing rock flying through space, 20,000 miles, all this crazy shit that, that is our reality, right?
Yeah.
And we've got all that going. And so yeah, and so as long as you think about life that way as a journey and you never think of it as complete and you're always willing to improve and learn, you're going to enjoy life, because there's always going to be opportunities to do that.
So my next question for you is a bit of a hypothetical question. So I may or may not have a time machine up here in New Hampshire. To your earlier question about speeding up time, so this may be a solution. So next time you're in the area, come up to Boston for an event or whatnot, tracking, got to make sure inputs or outputs are good. But you're up in the area, come visit, have a beer. We'll use a time machine. And it's a particular kind of time machine, though, because you go back in time and you get to meet yourself 4 days after leaving school. So perhaps even the Talmudic law, you just finished it, and 4 days later, you get to meet that version of you, that Saul. What do you tell him? What kind of advice would you give yourself?
Okay, well, first I'd tell myself, you're an idiot. Like, let's just be clear. I want you to understand where we're starting from. Like, You are a total idiot. But now, if you want to get, if you want to break that sooner, you want to move out of that. Um, I think the most important thing that you have to work on as a professional, for at least it's for me personally, is communication. Understand how to communicate effectively. Understand how to communicate clearly. If you can figure out communication, everything else falls into place. If you can figure out how to communicate, whether it's communicate your ideas, communicate your passion, if you can figure that out, you're going to be set. And just study communication, understand how it works. Read Dale Carnegie again, right? Go read all the books, right? And just try to understand how we as humans, kind of communicate and connect,
Yeah.
and that'll set you up for success.
Boom. I love that. I love that. Man, who can't, what's interesting? My wife gives me that idea, that advice too. She's like, you know what? You got to get better at communication. And I do. She is right. Um, Man, so much to pick on here. Where can people reach out if they want to connect with you? More information, that the academy, all the places. Where should they go?
Well, I mean, obviously, email is always good, and that's Sol, SOL, at salesimpact.io. I'm also on LinkedIn, Sol Weinreich. Um, I'm not that active on just the general social anymore. I kind of deleted Instagram and Twitter because they were taking up too much of my life,
Yep.
and wasting too much of my time, and I got to be focused. And so I'd say, it's LinkedIn, email, but I'd love to hear from people, and love to, I always love to talk about, talk marketing. That's my passion.
Amazing. Amazing. So thank you so much for coming on here, schooling me on these good things, stirring up some really interesting topics. And I've written some to-dos down of things I want to investigate after this podcast. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks, Casey. It was great to be here. I really appreciate, the opportunity, and it was fun to talk about this stuff. This is, obviously some of the things I'm very passionate about. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed.
Absolutely. For those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, because I literally have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back, and I ran out of space. I'm in the margins, I'm left and right. So if you learned something, like you learned one of the 30 things that I learned today, then share this episode with one other person. Not even, well, 9,000 would be nice too, but really put what your takeaway was. What did you get out of it? Was it about the incrementality? Was it about being not going crazy and with the A/B testing, but the idea of looking at ops, being obsessed about the ops reports? So there's just so much in here to think about later on. So if you learned, then share this with someone else, tag us, and we'll hop in on LinkedIn and have a little convo. It'll be a good time. Again, Saul, thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Casey.
All right, everyone. This has been a crazy cool, amazing fun, super-tastic, awesome podcast of the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will see you all next time.